For nearly 5 years, we've heard the story of Luis Elizondo. After retiring as a senior intelligence officer within the Department of Defense, and after being a former counterintelligence agent within the U.S. Army, his efforts and his story have played a crucial role in the change in global conversation about UFOs and UAP. His actions and his story may have even played a role in motivating Congress to create legislation and pursue answers to a pressing mystery. But according to Elizondo, his actions didn't come without a cost. According to him, he was faced with retribution, false information to the public, abuse by government authority, and the illegal destruction of information, all by people within the very department he once worked for. So to clear his name, he filed a 64-page complaint to the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General. This video is a deep dive into that very document, as published in redacted form by the New York Post. What's in it? What exactly is being alleged? And does the evidence that we can get access to support or contradict the rather pointed allegations about certain individuals? Stay tuned. 5 October 2017, I received a telephone call on my personal cellular telephone from Mr. Gary Reed's executive assistant, in which she said Mr. Gary Reed wanted to speak with me. I reminded her that I was now a civilian and that I was under no obligation to speak with Mr. Gary Reed, but in the spirit of transparency, I would do so. She acknowledged my comment and transferred me to Mr. Gary Reed directly. During the conversation, Mr. Gary Reed asked me what he should do with the letter, and I told him he should do whatever he thinks is prudent, but the letter was intended for the Secretary of Defense. Mr. Reed was clearly upset with me and indicated that he wanted to see me in his office. He also said that he would tell people you are crazy and it might impact your security clearance. I responded to Mr. Gary Reed by telling him that he can take any action he thinks is prudently necessary, but that I was not mentally impaired, nor have I ever violated my security oath. I did not meet personally with Mr. Gary Reed after our discussion, as I feared he would take retribution against me. Note, the fact that Mr. Reed told me directly he would make efforts to undermine my credibility and clearance by threatening to officially question my mental health shows his personal targeted vendetta and abuse of power against me from the outset of my departure from DOD. The fact is consistent with continued falsehoods repeated by the department statements concerning me and shows a repeated pattern of abuse. The question mark that I had in this particular section was, this was the day after he resigned. His official resignation date was 4 October 2017. According to Luis Elizondo, Mr. Gary Reed within 24 hours was already calling him saying, I'm going to make you look crazy. I'm going to make you look like a fool. I'm going to make you this. I'm going to make you that. But what I don't understand is where in this resignation letter, and I invite you to read it, was there any indicator that Mr. Elizondo was going to go public and start sharing his information to where Gary Reed would have to target him that way? I personally, I can't really find the connection of what he's saying. Is Gary Reed just going to make the guy look crazy internally so that way if on the off chance Mr. Elizondo is trying to get some other government contractor position, he'll lose his clearance and can't get it? I don't know. I interviewed Mr. Elizondo in January of 2021. Did you know, did he tell you about To the Stars before you resigned?
I think it was Jim Semivan who actually said, hey, why don't you consider jumping on board with us? If I remember, now don't hold me to it, but I mean, we're going back 3 years now.
Sure.
I'm pretty certain it was Jim who actually was the one to offer me a position.
Pre-resignation or post, just for chronological?
No, post.
Post,
no,
gotcha.
Post.
I got you. So you...
Yeah, because I think they knew that I was going to wind up working at, I got to be careful. I don't want to put a plug in for it. I was going to wind up working, probably at a supermarket, just to pay my bills afterwards. Because even though I had left the department, I'm not the age of retirement yet. I can't collect my pension, so I still needed employment.
So why are we setting up Gary Reed as this vendetta planning person within 24 hours saying, I'm going to make you look crazy, but make him look crazy to who? The checker at the supermarket he was about to work with? No. So that also doesn't make sense with what he was saying. If you don't know what Luis Elizondo said in relation to joining TTSA and what his original plans were, again, working at a supermarket, you might read that and go, aha, see? So this was the plan all along. Mr. Evil Scumbag Gary Reed's going to come along, and when he comes public with TTSA, he's going to make him look crazy. And that's the origin of this whole story. But that's not the story, at least according to Mr. Elizondo. So to make him look crazy, according to Mr. Elizondo, he was out. He was like, I'm done. I'm going to go bag groceries, and I'm going to support my family in a very, again, honorable American way and hold a job, but away from government, away from security clearance, and I'm going to work at a supermarket. And yet there's a different story being crafted here within 24 hours of his resignation letter that Gary Reed set it all up, that he was going to make him look crazy. Maybe he was going to. But why? What motivation would he? It just kind of comes out of left field in the story. November 2017, back to the complaint. After several telephone calls from former colleagues, redacted, and others within OUSDI warning that Mr. Gary Reed and Redacted were coming after me and insinuating I was a fabricator, I decided to obtain private legal counsel to ensure my security clearance would not be in jeopardy. I was informed that Redacted was doing the dirty work for Mr. Gary Reed, and they were trying to destroy my reputation at the Pentagon. Knowing that both Gary Reed and Redacted were actively working to hurt my security clearance was and is extremely concerning. On December 17th, 2017, both the New York Times and Politico broke the story about the ATIP program. In both these stories, Pentagon spokesperson Dana White validated the existence of the program and my role as lead. Here's what's interesting about that, because that specifically is more so the Politico article. There were no attributable quotes to Dana White. She was mentioned, however, she never had an attributable quote. So why isn't this stuff ever black and white? The one time that we could solve this whole mystery and have an official statement on the record about Luis Elizondo from a Pentagon spokesperson, it happens to have two aspects to the story that we can't get away from. Number one, there is no attributable quote. So it's not that I don't trust Brian Bender, but whenever you're putting something on the DOD, in my opinion, we should have some kind of backed up quote or an email. So maybe you could paraphrase it in the article, but if something starts to get challenged like this, we can share that email. It's public record. They're public statements, not off the record. Yet Mr. Bender, Politico, and no one attached to the story has been able to do that. Second thing that's often forgotten about is Dana White left with a big controversy hanging over her back. She was let out the door with a controversy that she was abusing her staff and having them go pick up her dry cleaning and stuff like that. So she was not a prime character witness here, just simply because she left in disgrace from the DOD. So nothing is ever black and white in this story. 18 December 2017. During an interview at CNN headquarters in Washington, D.C., former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and former Director of National Intelligence, General James Clapper, indicated to me and my spouse that he was very happy we had a UFO program at the Pentagon and was proud that I ran it. No idea. I mean, okay, so away from the fact that that's hearsay, let's talk about James Clapper. Why would he say that? Proud that he ran it? Well, it's just because they had a backdoor meeting at CNN because they were being interviewed on the same program at different times. Did Clapper know about? Like, there should be some kind of context here, and yet there is none. And you'll see quite a few slides from now, but one of the attachments is a photo back stage on CNN's back green rooms or wherever they were, of James Clapper and Luis Elizondo posing for a photo. But why? Why was he proud? Like, did he just hear the story and say, yeah, well, I'm glad, the aerial threats, we should look into it? Well, that's not surprising at all. So again, these kind of things are thrown out there that sound really good, but when you start digging in at the context of it, it doesn't necessarily really play out the way that it was intended. February 2018, after the publishing of a New York Times article about ATIP and my role, I received several more telephone calls from former associates who stated that Mr. Reed had launched an investigation against me through the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations in the hopes of finding derogatory information about me and or to substantiate his claim of mental instability. I was also notified that my DoD computer systems were confiscated in an attempt to determine if I had taken any information with me in an unauthorized manner. That's not too surprising, given the fact that those videos that he wanted for internal use were now blasted on the New York Times, Politico, and pretty much every news outlet imaginable. So in Mr. Elizondo's own words, he, who is attached to the internal process to get them reviewed for what he calls a internal database, why wouldn't you investigate that if these things all of a sudden ended up smashed all over the media? So to give this type of context to the story, it now makes sense why AF-OSI would investigate. Was it instigated by Gary Reed? I don't know. It's quite possible. Who cares? The reality is that per Mr. Elizondo's words, those videos were never supposed to be out in the open. He intended them to be used internally. What happened? They get blasted all over the place. So of course they're going to take it seriously. It doesn't matter if the biggest scumbag within the DoD is out to get anybody. It does not matter. The context of the story actually shows why they would do the investigation. So, was it instigated by Gary Reed? It's irrelevant. The truth behind it is videos were blasted that should not have been out. March 2018. I was informed by a member of the DoD IG that Mr. Gary Reed was under a formal Inspector General investigation for inappropriate relations with Redacted and an additional accusation of possible sexual harassment against one of my former subordinates, Redacted. Later that year, I was interviewed by two representatives from DoD IG regarding the conduct of Mr. Gary Reed. I explained that I did not trust Mr. Gary Reed based upon personal observations while employed as a DoD civilian. I also indicated that there was a strong likelihood of Mr. Gary Reed seeking retribution against me for leaving the department in the manner I did, results available within controlled DoD IG channels. I was assured by DoD IG personnel that this threat was unconscionable. 2019. Under a Freedom of Information Act request by a member of the media, it was revealed that an official U.S. AF-OSI investigation was conducted regarding 3 unclassified videos that were authorized for release. In this investigation, there were no findings of me conducting any kind of unauthorized disclosure. Note, I was contacted on April 21, 2021 by Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency Special Agent, Redacted, advising I was required to submit a new interview for my security clearance, even though it was just approved in January 2021. I engaged with Redacted twice, April 26, 2021 and April 27, 2021 in this new interview. One of the inaccurate allegations Redacted stated was that 3 videos were released inappropriately by me. She was unaware of the previous AF-OSI investigation that concluded no wrongdoing on my part related to this specific matter. In my opinion, also untrue. Why? The actual evidence. If you look at it, it didn't say that he didn't do any wrongdoing. It clearly, if you read the redactions between the lines, I mean, it's no secret he filed the DD Form 1910. It's no secret that he didn't want them to be distributed to the media, but rather he wanted them for internal use only. But a reminder, the guy who reviewed the information stated he would not have approved the videos for release to the media. So if this was done properly and they were properly described of what they would be used for, they wouldn't have gotten the approval. So that doesn't equate to you didn't do anything wrong. That just means that it wasn't framed correctly, so mistakes were made. Additionally, I think we can safely say that's Elizondo, never received confirmations the videos were declassified. So what's going on here? And that's what I want to know is why are we making certain claims that just aren't backed up. This breaks down more of that AF-OSI investigation to prove my point. It was not about wrongdoing by Luis Elizondo, but rather it was about, and look at the subject, Air Force Office of Special Investigation, Detachment 334, case, long number, December 2017, unauthorized disclosure of potential classified DoD videos. This wasn't an investigation into Elizondo himself, but rather an investigation on whether or not classified videos were currently being disseminated. Sit tight, because I think you'll see the differentiation between this investigation and another one which clearly upset Elizondo, but I think, in my personal opinion, is actually warranted and makes sense. You can see here that number 6 that was checked, attached is forwarded for action. This is key. The AF-OSI report, which again outlined, I didn't go through it word for word, I invite you to do so, but I highlighted the key parts, that this wasn't just for information purposes, meaning Elizondo was cleared, you don't have to do anything, here's the information, there you go. Rather, they said, here you go, DOD or OSD, this is our investigation submitted to you for action. Jumping down here to this section of the investigation, the request for release, there was no indication the videos would be released to any news media outlet. The reason for publication was listed as not applicable, not for publication, research and analysis only, and info sharing with other U.S. government and industry partners for the purposes of developing a database to help identify, analyze, and ultimately defeat UAS threats. Blank stated he would not have approved the video for release to the media. Additionally, Blank never received confirmation the videos were declassified. I know I already read that to you, but it's important to read again because this, I believe, plays into the action that they submitted in April of 2018, on the 21st to be exact. Now look at this. As of May of 2021, according to Elizondo, I am now under increased scrutiny regarding my security clearance. The investigative body is the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, or DCSA. Despite a previous favorable AF-OSI investigation, I am under accusation of releasing the videos in an unauthorized manner. In addition, other false allegations have been made against me, including statements I never made on the History Channel television show Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. It should be noted that the DCSA falls directly under the cognizance of Mr. Gary Reed. At one point during my conversation with the investigator, redacted, the discussion involved my role in ATIP. As I explained my former leadership role, redacted interrupted me and stated, no one is arguing the fact you ran ATIP. This issue is regarding the videos. I was shocked and surprised to hear this, given the current public stance of Ms. Goff. If the investigators at DCSA are aware of my role in ATIP, why is the Pentagon taking a different stance publicly? Furthermore, why am I being reinvestigated over an issue after already being exonerated? Here's the problem. Also, I believe, in my opinion, untrue. Let's dissect it. This was submitted for action. They're now looking at Mr. Elizondo. Why? The action is based on the fact that Mr. Elizondo stated one thing on the form, never received confirmation that the videos were declassified, and it was clear that the OCA said, nope, if I knew that they were going to be winding up in the media, I would not have done it, would not have approved them for public release. So, of course, naturally, that action is going to be, okay, at least AF-OSI determined that the videos were unclassified, which was the end of their report. So when it came to the video subject of the investigation and that portion, it was determined that classified information was not floating around. But that did not mean that there was not mishandling of that information, potentially, by Mr. Elizondo, who was tied to the whole story. Hence the action by DCSA. They now look into the person behind all of it. But does it make sense that it would take this long to do an investigation? Well, keep in mind, AF-OSI stopped in 2018. Luis Elizondo was already out of government at that point. So why in 2021 did all of a sudden he start getting this scrutiny? We can only speculate at this point, but it is quite possible that everything that I just outlined plays into why they started to do it. And maybe another part of this is that he was going to start utilizing his security clearance again. So DCSA decides, based on this previous report investigation by AF-OSI, there was no need to do it in 2018 because Luis Elizondo was still with TTSA, didn't need a security clearance. But now, let's say, with all these rumors that Luis Elizondo's consulting for Space Force or Space Command, whatever it might be, now all of a sudden, maybe when he did start getting this extra scrutiny, he needed his clearance again. He needed that to utilize that security clearance that, although was sitting there, now it's being utilized. So quite possibly they look back and say, hey, we had this pending 2018 action. Now that he's going back to work as a contractor, we need to pursue it. Of course, I will make sure you guys know that there's speculation in there, but it does make sense based on the evidence that's put forth that they would look into this. I don't know what exactly he's referring to about the statements made in unidentified. I have a guess, but I don't want to speculate too much there. So I'm not entirely sure without seeing any paperwork from DCSA. So I'm just going by what I see here. And if he's saying that he's being reinvestigated, that is untrue. AF-OSI was looking at the videos. DCSA was looking at the person. This was submitted for action based on this. This all makes sense. So this narrative, I believe, is wrong. The second part of this interrupted me in stating no one is arguing the fact that you ran ATIP. This issue is regarding the videos. Yet again, crafting a narrative that isn't true. He's trying to play off of this, stating, aha, well, nobody's questioning it, ergo, it's true, and you believe it, so why is Susan Goff stating otherwise? But to an investigator, it doesn't matter if he ran ATIP or not. Like, none of that was part of the scope of the investigation, not part of the stated scope of AF-OSI's investigation, and not part of the implied scope that Mr. Elizondo describes the DCSA investigation. But rather the fact that they go, look, we're not investigating whether or not you ran ATIP. Essentially, they wouldn't care. That's irrelevant to the investigation. What is relevant is the handling of classified information. So a lot of people come after me going, you're playing semantics. This is a clear indicator of semantics and twisting what is said to benefit you. And yes, I do believe that, because you have to look at all of this in its totality, because the evidence goes against the crafted narrative. That's what we have to do. Hone in on just that. It makes it look like Elizondo is a target. Look at the totality of the evidence, tells you a different story. I often say documents don't lie, even though there can be lies on them. This is what I mean by it. You look at something and what people say, but then when you take all of the evidence and then look at it, it could potentially tell you a different story. And that's what I mean by all of this. Let me give you Mr. Elizondo's own words here in an important part of my interview with him, and I'll let you determine on whether or not any of this is truly how you feel it played out. According to the DOD anyway, those videos had to adhere to what was on that, what they call the DD Form 1910, which we didn't label it yet. But the DD Form 1910 was for that private U.S. government use only. And when Christopher Mellon had come out recently, he had said that he supplied those videos to the New York Times. Then in the James Fox's great documentary, in that, Christopher Mellon came out and said somebody, didn't name them, but somebody bent the rules. That was what his wording was, which I want to juxtapose that with how we were shown the videos from To the Stars Academy. I don't expect you to speak for To the Stars. I'm not asking you to, but I do want to ask about what they called the chain of custody, because that's another one of those disconnects where paperwork says internal use only, cleared for that. Then we see the videos and they were kind of advertised at, well, not kind of, they were advertised as going through the declassification process through DOD. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
What is that chain of custody?
I can't speak for Chris Mellon, and quite frankly, I've never asked Chris. I don't want to know. There's, I hate to say plausible deniability is sometimes a good thing. But out of respect for Chris, I've never asked him this source, and I don't really plan to be honest with you. That's between Chris and whoever he talked to. The how TTSA wound up putting them forward. I will tell you, if you were to ask me, I probably would have been more hesitant to do that, but it happened, and it happened without me knowing. That really wasn't.
So you had no idea that they were going to release those videos?
Not until the New York Times article. Yeah, that was not. I was not. I was not aware. So.
Were you aware they had them? If I can ask that.
No, actually. Let me think. John, I don't recall. I really don't. I don't think, because I remember being very surprised because the intent originally was for a community of interest, an unclassified, but for official use only, if you will, community of interest. And I wasn't the one who provided them. So I really don't know what TTSA was thinking. You probably want to talk to them. As you know, I'm no longer publicly affiliated with TTSA. They're great people. Tom's a great guy. We still talk. But I can't speak for TTSA.
I got you. No, I understand that and respect that. So that is my interview with him. And he had no idea, according to him. Couldn't think that he found out kind of with the rest of us. Remember, he's the one that filed the paperwork internally. And he doesn't know who Christopher Mellon's source is. So let's operate off the assumption that that is correct. And that he had no idea. And he didn't even want to ask Chris for plausible deniability reasons. Yet this photograph here came from what is kind of known in this conversation as the Chris Mellon leak. And I don't like leaks, but it's important here because, number one, it's not classified and we know exactly what it is now. And I'll show you Chris Mellon's own words. But on top of that, it gives a very important piece of the puzzle that goes against the context and claim made in the IG complaint that I've been reading you guys, and also the clip that I just showed you of what Mr. Elizondo told to me. These were DVDs or CDs, I think DVDs, of the videos. There's 4. I know there's 3 videos, a lot of question marks there. I would actually venture to guess that the DD Form 1910 is potentially on the 4th disc. Why would they spread them over 4 discs and not just put them on 1? Is likely. This is a guess and a little speculation, but I think that it's potentially an educated guess that each medium, each file could potentially be classified different. So you're not going to put an unclassified, a secret, and a top secret file generally on the same disk when being released out into the public. This is potentially they burned one at a time, ensuring that each particular media on each particular disk was unclassified. Okay. The 4th, so 1, 2, 3 would be the videos. 4 potentially is that paperwork to go along with it that they said in the very beginning was that chain of custody that no one was able to show. So then that chain of custody turned into the DD Form 1910. As talked about on Coast to Coast. Then that turned into, wait, I never wanted this to be out in the open, and I have no idea how it got out in the open. Yet the Chris Mellon leak shows us exactly how it got out into the open. This was the envelope that was given to Luis Elizondo. I haven't seen who R. Essex is. Likely somebody internally that works for a department in the DOD that makes, whether it be an IT department, I don't know. Again, lots of guesses here. Again, irrelevant, but rather this is the person burned these discs for Luis Elizondo. What's interesting here, though, is the date. Christopher Mellon, 1600 hours, so that's 4 o'clock, on the 7th of September, 2017. The DD Form 1910 was stamped only about a week or so, a week and a half or so prior to this for the internal use. So only in about 10 days did these discs get sent to Luis Elizondo after he got approved for that internal release. And again, I'm punching this point because it's important, only internal use as intended by Luis Elizondo. It only took about 10 days for him to lose that data. Regardless of it being listed as unclassified, that does not mean you can give it to anybody. There is things called controlled unclassified information, but there's also unclassified information that's exempt from disclosure. All different things, and he is not a release authority. So it took within 10 or so days to lose this information, to wind up in the hands of somebody who wanted to leak it to Christopher Mellon. They did so on the 7th of September of 2017. And here, in Christopher Mellon's own words, is that story.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, managed to obtain the tapes from the Pentagon and chose the New York Times to break the story.
I received the videos, the now famous videos in the Pentagon parking lot from a Defense Department official. I still have the originals in the packaging.
This is a case where somebody bent the rules a little bit, and they did so for the larger good, and we're absolutely all better off because of it.
Credit to James Fox and his excellent documentary, The Phenomenon, for that clip. Obviously, all copyrights given to him. But I wanted to show that clip because clearly rules were bent. This came out from a Department of Defense official. He still has the wrapping. So clearly what we are looking at is the UFO videos that he took a picture of and put it on his web server. I didn't tell this part of the story, but in short, that leak was not necessarily a hack or anything bad. Mr. Mellon had put all of this data on his web server, and it was at this public web server that somebody stumbled on it. I believe they refer to him as Twitter user J, still around, I believe, in kind of UFO Twitter. But stumbled upon it, released it, kind of the rest was history. So now we kind of put all this together. Do we really believe that Mr. Elizondo had zero idea? And again, if we do, which is fine, I'm not here to say the man is lying, but if we do, then that means within 10 days, he was careless with the information. It got out into the open. Rules were bent, which ended up in Christopher Mellon's hands. He later admitted in that documentary that he was the source for the New York Times. So it went to the media, and boom, media frenzy ensued. Why wouldn't you look into that? Why would Mr. Elizondo challenge that? If he didn't know, then he lost the material. That envelope had his name on it. It was delivered to him. So he lost it. If we believe him to his word, and that's fine, then he lost it and was careless with the information. AF-OSI says, look, we determined the videos are unclassified, but the way they got out is kind of suspect, so we're going to pass this back for action. DOD looks at it, says, yep, let's start questioning Mr. Elizondo and the potential, the possibility of the mishandling of information. None of that sticks out to me as a targeted effort. I don't care if Gary Reed, the scummiest of scumbags of the DOD that we all want to hate, had any role in it. All of that makes sense. The fact that they wouldn't do it would be more concerning than the fact that they did. Here's an extra tidbit of information for you. Remember that day that was passed off? That September 7th, 2017 date? You know what else happened that day? This document, also part of the leak, was the interview of Alex Dietrich. And this was done at the Sky Dome Restaurant, Doubletree Hotel, Arlington, Virginia. I believe, and this is just speculation, this spelling error we should look at. There is somebody involved in this conversation, God bless him, who pretty much misspells a lot of words. Sorry, Mr. Elizondo, but you do that quite often. So, did he type this? Not sure. But that is something to look at, because this, if typed by him, if he was there or had any role in this or whatever, this could have been the handoff or part of the handoff, and that that happened on the same day that they were doing this. Also around this time, you can see Luis Elizondo reached out to Alex Dietrich at the U.S. Naval Academy. This was August, so just a week prior, Alex Dietrich was sending copies of her logbook. This came out through the FOIA to Luis Elizondo. Why? Likely setting up this meeting here. Again, a lot of that is speculation, but it all kind of makes sense that that's when either the pass-off happened and Mr. Elizondo did it. But again, I'll let you guys decide, but evidence sure speaks volumes with those documents.